So it's
Oh, that
Hi, Wendy. This is Connie. Can you hear me? Nope. Hi, Imani.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you this morning?
Good. Are you able to, did you have any issues like with the share screen?
I haven't tried actually, so let
Okay.
me do that now. Let's see, screen and share. Can you see my calendar?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So we're good. Are you staying on the course or not?
No, I just wanted to jump on to make sure that everything was working fine because I know
Okay.
sometimes it can be a little wonky.
Yeah. Well, and I can see Wendy Madison. Can you hear me? I can
Oh,
see
you're
Wendy,
muted.
but you're
Oh, yeah, hold on.
there you are.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can. Imani, the only other thing that I would ask is, I mean, I can certainly just reach out to people and say, hey guys, mute your screen, mute yourself if needed in case we get any feedback. But do I have the ability to mute? Probably not. It doesn't matter.
I think so,
I just
but
want-
it should be so that everybody is muted upon entry.
Okay. And then they have to unmute to
Mhm.
ask questions. Okay.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right. Well, Wendy, thank you. Wendy was our first. You win the prize for being the early girl. Hi, Megan. How are you? All right.
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm going to stop the share for just a minute.
Actually, Megan's in the office with me.
Okay. We're getting a little bit of feedback from you guys, maybe because you're in the same room. So what you might need to do is just turn on one of you at a time if you have questions.
Right.
Okay. That'd be great. And we're going to wait just a couple of minutes. I appreciate you being here early, but we'll wait till 11, make sure we don't cut anybody out.
I'm gonna hop off, but text me if anything weird happens on here.
Excellent. Thanks, Imani.
No
Appreciate you.
problem. Bye.
Tell your mom I said hi.
I will.
Wendy and Megan, I guess, are you in the training room? Are you in the training room? That's what I thought. I was going to say, I see this wonderful whiteboard behind you. I want to see it full with clients. Awesome. Awesome. Well, while we're waiting, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about yourself. Oh, now, Megan, you're going to have to turn your volume back on.
Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Okay. So my name is Megan, obviously. I'm a new agent. I'm in Ignite currently. Got my license and started with KW around December. So
Nice.
just trying to take everything in that I can and learn as much as I can.
Lovely, lovely. Well, nothing like starting your business in a pandemic. That's awesome.
Yes. Yes. When I started the classes to get my license, like 2 or 3 days after everything shut down.
Oh, good for you. You know, it's a good use of your time when you're
Yeah.
home.
Yes.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, welcome. Glad you're here today. I'll be teaching the Ignite class on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you this again as others, if we have others who join us this morning. What we're going to go over today is sort of a very condensed version of what I'm not going to cover all the stuff today, but it's all focused on buyers. So on Thursday, there'll be a lot more discussion about even getting the buyer in for your buyer consultation, et cetera, how to manage that. But today we're really going to focus just on, okay, make the assumption you've already got them to agree to have a buyer consultation with you. Now what? So
Okay.
we'll kind of go through that part today, and then we'll expand a little bit more on Thursday during the Ignite. Hi, Regina, how are you? Nice to see you. All right, so Wendy, I'd love to hear your background. Megan has to turn her thing off. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Whoop. Ooh, we are getting an echo.
But mute your audio.
We did. I don't know why it's feedbacking so much.
Yeah.
Well, we may have to pass. Sorry, Wendy. Unless we can figure out that reverb.
Hey, can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Connie?
Yes. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
So sorry, you can hear me?
Yes.
That's so funny. Now we have both muted.
You're showing as
This was our good idea to watch the meeting together, but the audio logistically is a problem. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Well, you
Oh,
probably don't want to
sorry.
sit any closer to each other than you are
Now we
for,
have no
for
audio at
COVID
all.
reasons. But I'm glad you're together. That's awesome. All right. Well, welcome. I see Regina and I see Kathleen. Carrie is coming in. Karen Cohen. We got a number of people hopping in. So we'll give it another minute or two before we launch. Okay. If y'all will just hang in there with us for a minute. Oh, and Regina, I'm seeing the chat. You're in the doctor's waiting room and you're logging in. Now that is a dedicated agent. And I want to point out to a lot of you who are new that it's really a pleasure for me when I see an agent who's been in the business for a while, like Regina, who still is engaged in learning. You know, that no matter how long you've been at it, you can always pick up something new. So keep that in mind as you move forward. Oh, and Carrie, thank you. I miss you too. So if y'all will bear with us, we're going to give it maybe 2 more minutes. I'd like to start at maybe 11:05, if that works for you. Now, Karen, I can see your lips moving. I don't know if you're trying to talk to me. You're muted at the moment. And to everybody, I can also see Keith and John joining us. I may or may not be able to see everybody on the screen once we get really going. So if you have questions, do try and put them in the chat room, you know, as to everybody. And I will try and answer your questions as we can. Sometimes it's hard for me to focus on the content and watch the chat room. So that's part of why I was asking Imani if she was staying on the line, but we'll get there. Anyway, just to reiterate what we're doing today, this is kind of a crash course. It's a 1-hour class today regarding the buyer consultation. For those of you who are in Ignite, you will see me again in person, live and in person on Thursday from 1 to 4 in the training room, where we'll go into more in-depth on the buyer consultation. What we'll cover then that we're not covering now is more about how you even get them to come and agree to a buyer consultation, and what's that pre-planning process. What do you do in advance of the consult? What do you do after the consult? And then what we're going to do today is essentially just focus on, we're going to make the assumption you've already gotten agreement for them to attend a buyer consultation. And so we're going to talk about sort of at the consultation, what to expect and how to manage it. So it'll be a much more in-depth class on Thursday, but hopefully this will help each of you with at least a little bit of your concerns and your knowledge about the buyer consult. So, all right, we got 1 more minute and then we'll get started. Can everybody hear me fine? Just give me a nod or a thumbs up or something.
Hear you fine.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And you guys are really good. We're all getting really good at Zoom. And that's an excellent thing because, if you can mute and unmute as you have a question, you're welcome to hop in at any time. Or you can throw something in the chat room and we'll get to it. One of the things I want to find out from you before, and we're at 11:05, so I'm going to start. I like to be respectful of your time, and we'll finish by noon, if not sooner. Before I get launching into what I want to present to you today, I want to know, do you have specific questions that you want to make sure we cover about the buyer consult? Hop in if you do.
Are you going to go over the specific forms to use for buyer broker when they sign off on that? Are you going to go through all that too?
I'll go through some of it today. Great question, Karen. I'll go into it in more detail on Thursday in the Ignite class, largely because that's when you have, that's a 3-hour window, and to really go in depth takes some time.
What time is
it? So today is really going to be more just the buyer consult itself.
Okay.
We'll go over some of the paperwork, but not necessarily all. So, and
Okay,
the class
thank you.
on Thursday is 1 to 4.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hey, Connie, it's Teresa Count.
Hey, Teresa.
Hey, are you going to talk about defending your commission when people ask you for to return some of your commission to them?
I can, absolutely. Okay. Defense of commission. All right. Anybody else have something they want to make sure that I covered today? All right, so we're going to get started here. And actually the question that I just asked you is what I want you to be. And Teresa, thank you. I'm so glad, like I said about Regina, I love seeing seasoned agents coming in on these calls, because it just is indicative of everyone's desire to continually be learning. No matter how long you've been at anything, to just jump in and take a class on some topic is always a good thing. I learn something new every day. So that question that I asked you at the beginning of this class is kind of one of the first questions I want you to ask in a buyer consultation. That person has agreed to meet with you, and before they come and they're either face-to-face in a safe environment or on the screen where you're doing a Zoom call or something like that, you want to make sure that they're going to have questions floating around in the back of their mind. You want to make sure you address it, that you don't go through this presentation, because it's really not a presentation, it's a consultation. You want to consult with them and ask questions and answer questions. It's more of a conversation than a presentation. A presentation is where I'm sitting here spewing, and if you do that, you'll lose them. So you want to make sure you're talking with them, and one of the best ways to get started is ask. Say, thank them. Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate you and your time. And it's almost like you take yourself back to grammar school when the teacher would put up on the board that first day of class a syllabus. Do y'all remember that? And they would say, okay, this is what we're going to cover during school this year, or this is what we're going to cover this semester or this week or today, whatever the time frame is. You want to do the same thing with your buyer consult. Set it up so that they know what to expect and that this is what we're going to cover today. But again, I would thank them and say, are there specific questions that you have that you want to make sure we cover, and write it down. And then at the end of your consultation, it's a great way to tie down and say, look, did we fully answer your question about XYZ? And if not, then you go into more depth. Or you say, we have answered all your questions, right? And so you kind of pointed out that I set this goal for us and we've met it. It's a nice way to start your relationship with the client. So let's see what I'm going to do now. I'm going to hit share screen so you guys can come in and see my screen. All right, so one of the things that I do first before a consult, there's my birds at the beach. I've set up, you can see here in the middle of my screen, can y'all see my little cursor moving around, I hope? I've set up a folder, buyer consultation class. so that I have all the documents ready to go in one place. I'm not searching around on my screen for documents. Because one of the things that we're going to talk about first here is what kind of buyer consultations are you doing? Before I go any further, let me open it up for y'all to chime in. Have you had some buyer consults, and have they been in person or online? Anybody?
In person,
Okay. At the office?
usually at their home or a restaurant.
Excellent. Okay. Congratulations. Anybody else? Okay. Because I will tell you that your goal when you're first getting that, like I said, we're not going to cover the whole process today. That'll be covered more in Ignite on Thursday. But today we're going to focus on that buyer consult. And so we're going to make the assumption that you've already gotten them to agree to a consultation. And when I am doing consultations now versus a year ago, they would have been in person 100% of the time. And probably more often than not, it would have been at my office. You want to set the tone of being a professional, et cetera. But quite frankly, there have been plenty of times when my consultation was at Starbucks or, at a restaurant, as you said, Karen. There's plenty of occasions where that works because I'll give you the example. For instance, our office is in Marietta, but I might be meeting a buyer who is going to be focusing in DeKalb County. And by me requiring them to come to my office in Marietta, number one, it's inconvenient for them, perhaps. And number two, it sets up a little bit of doubt in their mind. Oh, she's really located more in Marietta. Is she going to be able to help me in DeKalb County? So depending upon where that person is going to be looking for homes, I might adjust where I have my consultation. The other thing is now with Zoom, it's fantastic because you can do it from the comfort of your house if you want to. And yet it is still in many regards face-to-face. You get the opportunity to do facial recognition. You can see expressions on their faces. You get a little bit of body language. And so, Zoom I have found to be a great tool instead of sometimes, going to some remote location. Particularly now, I was talking to an agent yesterday at an open house, and she said that she was rather embarrassed. She set up a buyer consultation to meet at a Starbucks, only to arrive there and find out that they were not allowing in-store sitting. You could come in and get your coffee to go, but you couldn't sit in the place. So again, you need to make sure you're checking your location to be positive that it's available. So, and if you have not gotten proficient at using Zoom and sharing your screen, that's something you're going to definitely want to practice these days. If I can learn it, anyone can. So, but you want to be able to share your screen. You'll notice here, as I've set up, so for instance, if I've got a buyer consultation with a particular buyer, I may literally set up a folder on my desktop so that it says their name. And all I have to do is open up that folder and I've got the information that is very specific to them. So I'm not fumbling around trying to find a file in a folder that I can't quite remember when I'm in the heat of it, where I've located something. So they come into the consultation, I've asked that question. And Teresa, I will get back to your question towards the end of today about fees. But just to kind of go down here, you'll see I've even come in and I brought in these documents from a different folder. I brought in a copy from a different folder, and now I've sorted it. I've renamed them A through F so that I make sure I go through them sort of in the order that I would like to go through them. Make sense? So get your act together and have it ready so that you can go. The good news too is that you have your screen. One of my pitfalls, I tend to be a talker, And one of my pitfalls is running over. And so I can look at my screen at any given time, and I'm not having to look at my watch and be aware of what time it is and how much time I have spent on a particular topic. So, like I said, a Zoom call works. Face to face is also lovely. I mean, it's really, it's preferred, but quite frankly, with COVID, you want to be sure that you and your client are safe. I have also done in the past, I've done a buyer consult in a house, not that person's house. I might have even met them to do a showing, and I will give them the sort of the preemptive, hey, we're going to meet there, but we might spend a little bit of time in that house while I go over a few things with you. Obviously that's not ideal, but sometimes you have to go by the seat of your pants. So let's get started here. So before they've come in and met with me for the consultation, I've had them fill out a questionnaire. I'll go to that second, but when they are actually at the consult, this is the first document that I pull up. Again, this is that syllabus that your school teacher used to put out. And I'm telling them right off the bat, here's our goals for today. Number one, we're going to discuss your wants and needs for a home. Okay, we're going to review the buyer questionnaire, which they have filled out and sent back to me. And we're going to define their search criteria for when you set up their portals in FMLS or Georgia MLS. Number two, we're going to discuss the process of buying a home. Now, this really applies more to that buyer who is a first-time home buyer. One of my scripts is, and everybody uses different wording, but I'll tell someone as I'm getting them to the agreement to come to a buyer consultation is, if you're a first-time home buyer, I just love it for you to come in and meet with me, because you can have a PhD from Harvard, but if you have not bought a home before, this is your first time, and I want to put you at ease, and we'll go over a lot of these things before we're in the heat of the moment and making an offer, and you have time to ask questions, and we'll go through it. It's kind of like that, what to expect when you're expecting. So if you've got a buyer who has purchased 6 or 7 homes in their lifetime, they might not need a full-blown consultation around the process. However, as you'll learn with Keller Williams, you always want to dig deeper with your questions. So first question is, have you bought a home before? And the answer is yes or no. If the answer is no, that's an easy one. Well, then we're going to take some time here, and I'm going to explain the process, and you'll have a chance to ask whatever questions you have. If the answer is yes, I've bought a home before, then you have the opportunity to say, great. Was it in the state of Georgia? They might have bought a home in another state, and the process there is different. And then if they say, yes, I bought a home in Georgia, you're going to say, great. How long ago was it? Maybe the process has changed a little bit. Certainly the contracts have changed because they've changed every year. Or maybe it's been long enough to where they have forgotten. They kind of sort of remember what earnest money is. They kind of sort of remember what due diligence is. And so this is going to be a refresher course for you. So it could go a lot faster for that client who has purchased in the past. And then the last part of your consultation is going to be the getting started stage. We're going to review and sign a buyer brokerage agreement. We're going to talk about for sale by owners, open houses, and new construction. We're going to talk about the FMLS portal, and we're going to schedule our first home tours. So this is my syllabus for a buyer consultation. I like to have it out. I put a copy of it in front of me. If I were in person, I'd have a printed copy in a little folder for the client. And I keep a copy for myself, just it prompts me through the order in which we want to go. I will tell you that when I first got started, I worked as a buyer's agent on a team for many years, and it was through a bold class that I realized I had myself backwards. I used to start with reviewing the buyer brokerage agreement, and just going ahead and knocking that out and getting it out of the way. And then I realized that's really more about me and less about them. And so when someone's coming in, they're getting ready to start looking for a house, they want to talk. They want to tell you what they're looking for. They want to tell you about themselves. And so I switched the order so that that's what we start with. Always let it be about them and not necessarily about you. All right, before I go on to the next slide or document, does anyone have any questions on this form? Okay.
I don't have
Awesome.
any questions. I have a comment though.
Sure.
I really like your organization here. I'm
Thanks, Teresa. I appreciate
taking
that.
lots of notes.
Good, good. Well, obviously I've done this for a bit. You know, when you're a buyer's agent, that sort of becomes your focus. Now I'm a full-time just listing and buyer agent. So, but I still have that skill set, I hope. And a lot of this you want to keep in mind for your listing presentations. And quite honestly, I like to call them listing consultations now instead of presentation. Somewhere along the line, I heard that terminology that a presentation is almost like a lecture. A consultation, it's a back and forth with you and the people in the room. So it's just a mindset thing. I like to think of it as a consult. All right, so next thing up, this is, and I'm happy to share some of these documents with you. What I'll do is I can send them to Imani, and if you would like a copy, she can get that out to you. So this has been something I've developed over time. Here we've got our branding on it, our logo, etc. We set it up, and this is that document that I have sent out to them. You've got a lead, either it's a referral, you've met them at an open house, however that lead comes to you. This is the first thing I do is I send them this questionnaire. And I said, this is it's about a 3-page document. And I hope you'll take some time. I'm kind of role playing here. I hope you'll take some time and fill this out before our consultation. And then I give them an out, because you're going to find if you've studied anything about DISC profiles and personalities, you know, there are some people that this will drive them crazy if they have to fill out a form 3 pages long. They don't want to do it. They just want to come meet with you and cut to the chase. But I love this form because it will tell you right off the bat what kind of person you're going to be dealing with. The person who fills out every blank and gives you tons of detail is going to be looking for that from you. They're going to be looking for a lot of information. They want all the details. They may be a high C. You know, they want to know everything. The person who just fills in their name, phone number, and email address, that is a high D. They just want just the facts, ma'am. Let's move on. So this form serves a lot of purposes. You know, you get information, but it also tells you something about who you're going to be meeting with. The out that I give them is I tell them, look, and this is usually in an email after we've talked, I'll send it to them and I say, here's my questionnaire. I'm confirming our appointment for Tuesday at 4 o'clock. If you have time, please fill this out and send it back to me. And we'll be going over it during the consult. If you run out of time, don't sweat it, don't stress about it. We'll cover all this information in the consultation. It just helps me be a little more prepared if you can send me this in advance. So you've given them permission to not fill it out, but you've also indicated that you'd prefer that they do. So in there, you get the buyer's name, all their contact information. Here's where you can get their birthday, because guess what? They're going in your database, and you want to be sure and say happy birthday to them on their birthday every year going forward. I actually call and sing. So you want to find out, have you already talked about pre-qualification? If it's a couple or a or a single person, you want to know who's buying. Is it going to be in the name of the first buyer or the second buyer or both? You know, have they thought about, is it cash, conventional, whatever? Are you renting? When does your lease expire? Do you own something? Do you need to sell in order to buy? So this covers a lot of those questions pretty efficiently. Here you get those, what are those must-haves that you want to have for your house? What are the likes to haves that you want for your house? What are the preferred locations? Are there others that you would consider? So you can see there's, I'm not going to go through every question on this, but you can see there's generic questions and then there's specific. Do you have pets? You know, are there household considerations? You know, is there anyone who has special needs? You know, you might need to know if somebody's in a wheelchair and they've got to have ADA access. And then at the very end, just lifestyle. What do you enjoy doing most when you're at home? What do you like to spend time doing? What room do you like to be in? And then here's where I just get a little bit of just good old junk to talk about with them, because it's great when you're in the process or even at closing and they have said, I really like Atlanta United, and you might get them tickets to a game or something like that. You know, pay attention to those details because that's going to win them as a client for life. All right, so this questionnaire, if they filled it out at the beginning, before we get started in the buyer consultation, I do go through it with them and sort of line by line review it relatively quickly, almost as fast as I just went through it with you guys, but do touch on it and make sure if you have any questions that you're going at it. Like someone might say other locations you might consider, and they're looking at, you know, oh, they're looking at Marietta or they're looking at Dunwoody. Well, that should prompt a question from you. Okay, why are you considering those two different locations? Because they're not anywhere near each other. Well, you know, our jobs are here, et cetera. So go deep with your questions. This is first level. You've gotten the first level of question in writing. So now your job is to go deeper with your questions. They say, what features do you like about your current home? It's, well, I really like my kitchen. Okay, tell me about that. And again, ask questions and then be quiet and let them respond. Hope all this is making sense to you. Anybody have any comments they want to pop in yet? We good? I always like to breathe and make sure that if you have questions, I give you a chance to ask them. All right, so in the consult, we're going to go over that questionnaire. Back to our guide. Like I said, I'm always flipping back and forth to it. So we're going to review that buyer questionnaire and we're going to define the search criteria. By that, what I mean is pretend you're the buyer and I'm having this conversation with you. Okay, you've told me a little bit about what you want. And I hope you understand that buying a home, there's more to it than just, I would need 4 bedrooms and 3.5 baths, and it needs to be in this school district. That's why I'm asking you all these questions in the buyer questionnaire, because I want to find out a little bit more about you and your lifestyle. You may be that person who's real outdoorsy, and you might prefer to be in a home that's close to the Chattahoochee River so you can go hiking or jogging or canoeing or kayaking, or you may be that person that wants to be near shopping or bars and restaurants, or you want to be in a walking neighborhood, or you know, whatever the things are. We want to make sure that we're talking about those. However, you know that there's a thing called criteria, and then there's the wants and needs. The criteria may be 4 bedrooms minimum, 3 baths minimum. Do you have to have a garage or not? You know, those are the things that we can plug and play into our search online. But there's going to be some things that we just have to address visually. You have to either look at it online or go to the property to get a real sense of it, because you might say, I want a big backyard. Well, that's not a criteria that I can put in FMLS. I can't say I want a big backyard. You know, that just doesn't happen. But it's something that by looking at photographs and by me calling the agent on the front end, I can say, hey, talk to me about this yard. I don't really see many pictures online. And for my client, that's going to be a deal breaker. So let's talk about that. You also might want to say, what's big to you? If you're from Manhattan, a big backyard might be the size of my kitchen. If you're from Texas, a big backyard might be 3 acres. So make sure you've got clarity. So once you've gotten through those consultation goals, that's when I pop into, and again, as much as you can, go back to this checklist and say, okay, we've covered this. We're ready to move on to part 2. Are you all set? It gives them, again, that confirmation. Oh, she said we're going to go through these 3 things, and now we're doing it. So, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we're going to start now into the process. And let's just assume that they've told me, for the sake of today, that they are a first-time home buyer. And you tell them, well, you're in luck, because I love to explain this process to people who haven't gone through it before. And so what we're going to do, there's 2 different ways we're going to talk about the home process chart, and it depends on what your learning style is. Some people are very visual, and they like to see charts. So this is back from probably 10 or 15 years ago. This was a Keller Williams home buying process chart that I still use. And I go through this with them, talking about, here we're analyzing, and I'll say, look, here's what we're doing right here today. We're analyzing your needs. We've talked about what you're looking for. You filled out a questionnaire. And by the end of today, we're going to have completed steps number 1 and 2. We're going to review and execute the buyer brokerage agreement. Next step up is to make sure that your pre-qualification will set properties to visit, etc. And you can kind of go right down this chart, and you ask them, do you prefer to look at a chart and talk about timeline, or another option that I have for discussing the process is I actually pull up the purchase and sale document. You'll notice that I've taken the purchase and sale document. Like I said, if I'm meeting in person with them, I have a printed copy of this. Some people are still old school. They like to flip through paper. Others like to see it digitally. So you have to figure out, and you have to ask, say, how do you like to read things? How do you like to be communicated with? And so this is not super simple to do, but I can coach any of you how to do this piece. I go ahead and pull up a purchase and sale agreement in Command, and I put in here, you can see it says sample only, sample only, sample only, because I certainly don't want someone to inadvertently go take my document and go make an offer without me. Okay, so I've put a watermark on it, and I've put sample only all over the place. I've got my name down there, Connie Davison. I have filled in, hopefully, let me go back here. See, I've already got all the information filled in with me representing the buyer. And I use this document to review with the buyer. All right, so in the consultation, you've got this purchase and sale agreement. And one of the first things that I explain to them is that we're going to go through this, but not in super great detail. I'm using this as a tool to talk you through the process. But I also want you to see a purchase and sale agreement. This is, when they say you're under contract, this is the contract. The Georgia Association of Realtors has developed this, and generally speaking, realtors in the Atlanta area use this document day in and day out. And so for me, it's very normal, not scary stuff. But for you, this may be the first time you've looked at it. And I want to set you at ease, because I'm going to show you something that is going to help you. This wasn't always the case. It used to be in a purchase and sale agreement, you would have blanks to fill in throughout the document. Like over here, there might have been a blank, and down here, there might have been a blank. And several years ago, the powers that be got really smart, and they pretty much pulled everything to page 1. So page 1 is really a synopsis of your offer. And so as long as you can understand page 1, you should be good to go. And what I'm going to show you is that, for instance, here, purchase and sale is what we call paragraph 1. Once you get past this page, look, corresponding paragraphs, paragraph 1, purchase and sale. So everything about what's on page 1 is described in detail here. If I go here and I see, okay, closing date and possession is paragraph 4. If I scroll down, oh, look, closing and possession. There's the full description of the detail behind what you have filled in just a summary here. And I tell you, that really sets people at ease to know that, oh, it's not as complicated as I thought. This is all sort of fine print legalese, but because I'm giving this to you today, you're going to have time to really read it in detail. If you're that engineer or lawyer or personality that just wants to read all the details, you'll have plenty of time to do it because I'm giving it to you today. And I would send them a copy of this either electronically or physically so they can ask questions. Remember, this to them is new. And even for some of us who are newer agents, it's new to you too. So you want to make sure you're reading it and rereading it and rereading it so that you can answer those questions. And then I'll flip down for them and I'll show them. So all this stuff is just explanations of what's on page 1. And then you get some other terms and conditions. And you don't fill in any blanks until you get to this next to last page. These are fairly standard exhibits that we would go through and add to your contract. Any special stipulations, and I explain to them what that might mean. So let's say you're buying a house and it's got a swing set in the backyard, and you are past having children and don't want a swing set in your backyard. You want the seller to remove it. This is your opportunity for us to write in here, seller shall remove the swing set prior to closing. You know, or there may be certain other terms and conditions that are very specific to that property. These other exhibits are more typical, like the seller's probably going to have a seller's property disclosure for you, etc. And then the last page is where you have signatures. So once I've sort of gone through that first brush overall look at what a contract is, then I go back to them and say, okay, so now we want to talk about process. And this contract allows me to talk about the process with them, because it goes through it. I mean, you just touch here. All right, once we get beyond the, here's where we decide what, this is 123 Main Street. We're going to offer this price and we want the seller to pay some closing costs. Here's where you take a minute and you explain what that means, that this is not, you know, it's a negotiable number. You cannot write in the number, the words all. You have to put in a number, etc. But you talk to them here about closing and possession. So again, it's your trigger to remember to talk about each of the phases of the contract. So, all right, we've found the house, we're making an offer on it. You have to tell them when you want to close. If you're paying cash, that closing could be earlier. If you're getting a mortgage, you can expect that it's going to take somewhere around 30 to 40 days, perhaps even longer, for you to be at the closing attorney's office and buying your house. When you get ready to make an offer, I'm going to ask you to look at your calendar that day when we're making the offer and see if you have any conflicts. We also have to make sure that the date is not a weekend or a federal holiday. It has to be a banking day because wire transfers are occurring. Here's my opportunity to talk to them about earnest money. Here's my opportunity to talk to them about closing attorneys. And again, you go into a little bit of detail with them about what is earnest money. I'm not going to go through that with you guys today. Like I said, we'll go into it a little bit more in the Ignite class on Thursday if you want to circle back to that. I'm really just touching on process here for you. So you would talk with them about what is earnest money. Oh, okay. And here, you're going to have it either within 3 days of binding agreement and explain the whys, or with, just explain a little bit of that in your consult. Here's your opportunity to talk about inspection and due diligence and how many days that is. Explain to them what a time limit means. And I'm going to take a minute for those of you who are newer agents and you may or may not understand. The time limit of the offer means that your buyer has presented an offer, and if that seller agrees to it and sends it back to you within that time limit with no changes, then you're under contract and you're in binding agreement. All right. If they're going to counter offer in any form, the time limit really is a moot point. You know, the clock starts ticking again once you've made your counter offer. For instance, we had an offer last night on a property and they wanted a response by midnight last night. And we went back to them and said, we appreciate you and that you've gotten this to us very quickly on a new listing. However, it doesn't give us sufficient time to do our due diligence and check with your lender and make sure that everything's good to go there. And so respectfully, we will respond to you in the morning. Now, chances were pretty strong that we were going to counter on one or more conditions anyway. And so, but by communicating, I called the agent and chatted with them, so they had an idea of what the expectations are. Anyway, all this making sense? Everybody good? So I use this purchase and sale agreement to kind of talk through the timeline. You know, you can use this, or you can go back and use that process chart. If I was really good, I might even have a chance to do a split screen where you got the process chart on one side and the purchase and sale on the other. But then I feel like the print is so small that it would get lost in the shuffle. All right, so let me get out of that. Back to our buyer consultation goals. So once we've gone through that process, we've done an overview of the purchase and sale agreement with them. And I've talked to them about that typical timeline. The only other piece that I have not really added to my Zoom presentation, if I'm in the room with somebody, I'll literally draw a line, like a timeline that you would see on a chart and say, okay, here we are at contract date. Usually the first 5 to 10 days is due diligence. And then you would talk about the finance and appraisal contingencies and how all those things happen before you get to a final walkthrough and a closing. And if there's a possession after closing, how that works. Sometimes I don't get into all those details, especially possession after closing. Don't get into the details of that until we're actually making an offer. It's almost too much information to review. So pay attention to the person that you're talking with. Like I said, that face-to-face ability that Zoom allows you, or an in-person, I've done a consult before on the phone and I really don't like it, because I can't tell if they're rolling their eyes or if they're bored, or if they're falling asleep, or if they're really engaged. And they're waiting for me to stop talking so that they can ask a question. So as much as possible, make sure you can get face-to-face. The getting started piece. So here is where we take that time and we go through the buyer brokerage agreement. And I don't know actually if I put one on there. I'll look and see. And I want to make sure that we've also had some conversation before they walk out of the room or step out of the meeting about what to do in case of for sale by owners or an open house or new construction. And essentially you're just laying it out that, hey, you have made the decision, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, that you want to buy a house. And what you're going to find happening now is that it's kind of like if you are thinking about buying a red car and you've never owned a red car before, and you go to the dealership and you look at red cars and you think, oh, these are really neat, but I'm not quite sure yet which one I want. And you get back in your car and you're driving home, and all of a sudden you start noticing all the red cars on the road. You may not, I don't know if any of you have noticed that, but you start noticing those things. And so what you're going to find is that as you're going about your daily life now, going to and from work or school or just out and about, you're going to notice just about every for sale sign on the side of the road, or you're going to be seeing things on social media, or you're going to be seeing things online. And that's good news because we're going to work as a team. I like to think that I can be everywhere, but I'm not. And so if you run across, if you drive past a for sale by owner that you find a little bit interesting, we have these things called smartphones, and I want you to use it. I want you to stop and take a picture of that sign, and you can text it to me and say, Connie, here's this house at 123 Main Street that's for sale by owner. See what you can find out about it. Because if you go in and contact that person ahead of me, I can't help you negotiate. And you want my help in negotiations and getting through the process. And you explain to them about sort of the similar circumstance with new construction. You know, new construction, it's great. When you go in, make sure that they're aware that you're working with an agent, or better yet, let me take you there and review it with you. Open houses, go through that conversation with them. That an open house, you're more than welcome to go. No problems there. So let's see, we got about 15 minutes. So I want to get back real quickly here. Let's see if I've got it here. What I don't have is the actual buyer brokerage agreement, but I can talk about it, or I can go find one. Hold on. Let me see. So here's my buyer brokerage agreement. You see, I could get to it pretty quickly through another folder, but if I had it already preloaded into that folder on my desktop, then I wouldn't be bumbling around looking for it. So I start going through this with them, and I start off generally saying, this is required in the state of Georgia for me to have in order to represent you. And my typical buyer brokerage agreement is for about 3 months. However, you know, depending upon your circumstances, you know, maybe you're talking to someone who's in a lease and they really want to wait until their lease is up, and it might be longer than 3 months from now. Then you may adjust that. But I tell them, it is my hope that we're not going to take 3 months to find a house, but that's just my standard. By telling them that, you're planting the seed that you have a standard and that you have had past clients. So if you're brand spanking new and this may even be your first time getting a buyer brokerage agreement signed, you know, it gives them some confidence in you. And again, I point out to them, just like the purchase and sale agreement, the Georgia Association of Realtors got super smart and they put the bulk of the contract is on page 1. You'll see everything else is explanation of what's on page 1. Okay, so, and you can go through it with them. And you know, every agent's going to do it slightly differently. Like on mine, I don't have it on this one, but I tend to over send brochures. It's kind of a cover your rear, but I generally will check all of these except for retainer fee exhibit, because I don't work with a retainer fee. But I would send all these to them, and I actually send those through command and ask for them to initial it. And that way I have proof that they received it. And I explain to them when they get it, this is not something you have to sign. It's for your reading. Some of the information you may find doesn't apply, but there's some good information here, particularly if you haven't purchased a home before. And I recommend that you read it when you have time. Same thing on the buyer brokerage agreement. Best case scenario, you get them to sign it while you're in the consultation. If I'm doing a Zoom consultation, that's almost impossible. Unless I just jump off and send them a command loop and do it while they're still online. Most of the time I'm going to say, well, when we hang up from this call, I'm going to send you this. And after you've had a chance to read through it, please sign it. And then we'll have the opportunity to move forward. Because I do set it up that I don't work with people who aren't ready to sign the agreement. I don't say it in a nasty way, but just, I require this, it is required of me that I have an agreement signed with you. Now, that said, I want to give you one quick little past story, because I think for a lot of people, one of their concerns about a buyer consultation is the fear factor or the concern over getting them to sign the agreement. I had a client who was a lead that came in from online. He came in, we went through, the first 2 phases of the consult. And when we got to the buyer brokerage agreement, he sat back in his chair and put his arms across his chest and said, I'm not signing any agreements. I mean, I'm not signing any agreements. And so one of the things that I learned in a previous Keller Williams training, and there's so many great opportunities. One was called Mirror and Match. And so I closed my brochure that I had sitting on the desk in front of me with all the consultation documents. I closed it and I sat back in a very relaxed position with my hands open, not crossed over my chest. I just said, okay, John, talk to me about that, because you have a pretty strongly held opinion. Talk to me about it. And he shared with me that he had signed an agreement with a previous agent, and it was a 3 or 6 month agreement. And he said, I figured out after 1 week that it was a mistake, that I did not like that agent. He was awful. He wouldn't return my calls, yada, he went on and on about how terrible this agent was. And then he said, and I had to wait 3 months before I could find somebody else. Number one, he didn't know that he could cancel it. But number two, he just had a terrible experience. And so because I asked the question, why, I had the ability to respond appropriately. So my response in that case was, okay, well, number one, I want to apologize on behalf of the realtor community. I want to prove to you that not all of us are cut from the same cloth, and that you're going to be incredibly happy with your decision to choose to work with me. I normally don't do this, but I am happy to sign a 1 week buyer brokerage agreement with you. And if at the end of that week, you're not happy with my services, then we both walk away, no harm, no foul. But I can't take you out and be showing you homes and giving you any advice without you signing this document. So are you comfortable with that? He said, sure. So we signed a 1 week buyer brokerage agreement. And within, we went out and saw a couple of homes. He left town, and I went and videoed a few houses that came on the market while he was out of town. And he texted me and said, oh my God, you're out there videoing and sending me things. You're awesome. You can extend that agreement for 3 months. So you just have to be comfortable and ask the questions. There may be some other reason that somebody doesn't want to sign it, but you can't address it if you don't know what their reason is. So always, if someone starts to give you some pushback, ask what's the why on the pushback. We're running a little close on time, so I'm going to go through a couple of these next things fairly quickly. I do go through page 1 with them in the consult, and I'll say, so this sets me up as your exclusive agent. So in other words, you're not going out and talking with an agent from another firm, but I also want you to know it doesn't mean that you can only buy a Keller Williams listed house. Make sure you've had that conversation, because not every lay person understands. We assume they do, because for us, this is common. But you need to make sure that the buyer understands, what we take for granted. So the term, okay, our agreement is going to start today, and it's going to go through this. And at this point, it's up to you. Everybody, you've got to run your own business. Me, for my business, I tell them right here. And I want to assure you that you're going to be happy with your choice of working with me, so that if for any reason you decide down the road that this is just not working out, I ask you to do me a favor. Number one, talk to me about it. Let me know what's not working and how I can fix it, and give me an opportunity to fix it. If I cannot fix it, then you can terminate this agreement. Fair enough? And generally speaking, they're going to say sure. So that's my personal take. I never want someone to feel like they're under obligation to me and they're not happy. I want them to be content with the service that they're getting from me. And actually, there may be some others on the call who might be able to answer this question on paragraph 3. For me, I always check that I don't do dual agency. If you haven't studied it in depth, that's basically where you're representing the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. Some brokerages allow it, others do not. I know back in the day when I got started, Keller Williams and the Rawls Group in particular did not allow dual agency. I don't know if that, Teresa, you may know, I'm not sure if that has changed. Even if it has, I personally choose not to do it. If I've got a house that an unrepresented person comes to, I generally will either work with them as a transactional situation, but I will not work with them as a client. A lot of times I can refer them to another agent in our office and we get the deal done. I just think it's, for me, it's a smart way to go.
Connie, this is Carrie.
Yeah.
Sean Rawls told a story once of a buyer that he met at an open house that was his listing.
Right.
And he explained to him, I don't do dual agency. This, did the buyer consult, went and showed him 1 million houses.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally came back and said, you know what? I really like that first house where we met. And so what he said was he felt he had to do dual agency in that case because he knew both clients so well and their motivation and their top end and their everything. And so he checked, well, I guess he had, I don't know if he checked it on the original BBA, but he went ahead and represented them as dual with all the full disclosures and all of that.
They may have signed something saying they acknowledge.
And they signed something that they both know. And, who could not think Sean was looking out for everybody's best interest. But I sometimes tell that story when people ask, what the heck is that? And I say, I would prefer not to do that. But, every once in a while, there's some bizarro case.
Sure.
Where you just have to.
Because I wasn't sure if that is still a Rawls Group criterion or not.
I'm not sure either. Sherry would know.
I believe it is, but one thing to keep in mind is if you have a BBA with someone you meet in an open house and then they decide to buy the open house, you can't undo a representation agreement. So you're kind of stuck in dual agency at that point because you already have confidential information and you can't undo what you know.
Correct. All right, fair enough. Commission. So here's where I'm disclosing to them that I will be looking for 3% of the sales price at the closing, and that the seller generally is going to pay my commission. You have to be careful. I think there was a lot of conversation in the contracts class this year about and I'm sure I've probably said the statement before. So I'm really kind of free for you. The seller is paying my fee and you're getting the representation. Be careful of that statement because that can get you in some trouble. Because quite frankly, if you're honest about it and you think it through, there would be no commission if the buyer didn't buy. And so it is built into the price that's negotiated. So in some regards, the buyer is paying your commission. But I'm saying here that I anticipate regretted that. Where maybe it's someone who's used a discount broker and they're only going to pay the buyer's agent 2% or 2.5% or something like that. And it does not mean that I'm not going to show my buyers those homes. I just sort of feel like I'm okay with it, just working with what that listing, that specific listing, because the numbers of times that comes into play is a small fraction of my business. Others may feel differently. And I would talk, for those of you who are new, I would talk to several agents, because there are a lot that will check that box that say that the buyer shall pay the difference. So you need to be real clear about that. Coming down here, I write in, I mean, it depends on the situation. If I absolutely know in advance a little bit more about this buyer, I would change this. But if they might flip into a lease rather than a purchase, I let them know up front that I expect to be paid a minimum of $500, and that if the landlord, it's the equivalent of a month's rent, less any amounts received from the landlord. Okay, so if the 1 month's rent is $1,000 a month, and the landlord pays me $300, then this person is going to pay me $700 for having found that lease and negotiated. That may sound steep, but it's protecting my time. My time is better spent working with buyers than with renters. I know we're tight. We're kind of running a little over. If y'all want to stay on, you're welcome to, because I do want to get to Teresa's question about the challenge that some of us are getting now when someone says, can you rebate part of my commission? My answer is no. Just make it simple. There are agencies out there now. I think Redfin is one, and I'm sure there are others where if you use their services, then you can get some of that commission back. Teresa, generally speaking, when I will talk to someone about a discount on my commission or a rebate, it's if they're doing a buy sell. If they're willing to do 2 transactions with me, then I give them the discount at the second transaction. And I will typically put in there, like if they're selling and buying, or even buying and selling, because I've got one that's doing that right now. They didn't have to sell their house in order to make their next purchase. And so they went ahead and made their next purchase, and now we're selling. Then I would put it in one or the other of the contracts that upon closing of the second contract, as long as it is within 12 months of the first contract, then I will I will give them the equivalent of X number of dollars. But I would love to hear from you and others how you're handling that objection. Anybody?
I did have a buyer that was actually a referral. And after we'd been working together for 6 weeks, because they were in a very competitive price range, they then asked me, they said, I have a friend whose agent gave them 1% back.
Mm-hmm.
Will you do that for me? And I said, no, I can't do that. So I'm sorry. I guess I shouldn't apologize for that. But they did terminate, and they found a house with another agent.
Yeah. Did you have a protected period?
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
But they, this
Yeah.
was kind of nasty. With unilateral termination, the protected period remains. With the mutual termination, the protected period goes away.
It does not. Yeah.
And I did not want to sign the mutual termination. And they said they went to the broker, they went to Jean, and they went to the region and said she won't sign a mutual termination. So in the end, it was good to let them go. Oh, and they also said they would write negative reviews about me all over.
Oh, Lord. Well,
that was
sometimes
a negative experience, to say the least.
And I think as long as you set it up in that tone of voice and in that, I mean, it's a decision you have to make. There are some people who will take listings and discount their listing commission, and others who say, no, I charge 6%, and move on from it. And you have to be willing to lose some of that business. But if you move on from it, I like to think that there's other business out there that will replace it pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People that are going to treat you like that are going to treat you like that eventually.
They're going to nickel and dime you. They're going
You're
to
lucky
ask.
you got out before they kept on.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll do that throughout the whole termination. I've had a couple people ask me, if
Yeah.
I would discount. And I just straight up say, no, do you ask your doctor or your lawyer to discount, services that they provide for you? And I'm like,
Great
this is a
scripts.
business. Now, if you prefer to, go somewhere else and deal with another agent that will help you do that, then, that's fine. Because now I'm freeing up my time. I'm not going to go back and forth with somebody about, what I bring to the table as an agent. So I'll just basically say, no.
Yeah, good job,
That's
Nina.
not going to happen.
And
I have to feed my family as well. Right. And then
a
you
lot
flip
of
it on them. And you're like, well, yeah, would you want your boss to say, hey, will you take 50% of what I usually give you, to work, this job? So yeah, just know your worth.
I love
right. And
those
there's a
scripts,
lot
and
between.
we can,
You're not just door opener. There's a lot between.
right.
Well, getting under contract is important for, especially in a competitive price range, and contract to close is important too. Because I always tell people one of the most important things for you as a buyer is I will protect your earnest money. I will make sure that your earnest money, you get it back if anything goes sideways with the contract.
That's great. That's great. I love that, Teresa. And we can go over some more if those of you who want to discuss some more scripts, because script practice, I used to hate it. But if you can just kind of get over the title of it, it sounds really fake and cheesy, and it's really not. It's just practicing what you're going to say. And I would tell all of you who are on this call and have been on it, thank you. And I hope that you have great success with your buyer consultations. I'm always happy to take a call if you have a quick question. I'm showing you here on the screen. This is not mine. This was one that came off of another Keller Williams agent who did a buyer's guide. You've probably had some classes or had some conversation with listing agents who do a pre-listing presentation. This is a presentation that this group here's how we make buying really simple. Here's our value proposition. This is why you want to choose to work with me. I used a buyer guide more in the past. I've gotten a little leaner with it, but I think I may go back to it because it's a fairly easy thing that you can send in an email as a PDF or something like that, so that as they come to your buyer consultation, they get it. Oh, wow, this is why I want to choose this person. I'm going to get you through all these things. Here's all the stuff that I do to get you to your new home. I think this is a particularly pretty presentation. Talks a little bit about closing costs. So, all those things that this group does. I think it was a nice presentation. So like I said, if you're interested in some of these things, I'm happy to send them to Imani, and you can reach out to her and she'll send them on to you. The other thing, there's plenty of, there's the Ignite coursework. This is one from probably about 10 years ago. It's still some of the same information, but presented in a slightly different way. Again, you're setting expectations. You're going to do what you say you'll do. I love having that syllabus at the beginning of my presentation. And this just kind of helps you practice it. I highly recommend, I'm going to hit the stop share for now. I highly recommend that you practice getting in there, and even if it's with your spouse or your sister or your brother or your next door neighbor or somebody, your best friend, they're awesome. They'll sit and listen, give them a beer after, just say, hey, I'm going to do a buyer consultation this week and I'd really like to practice. Will you be my guinea pig? And practice it before you're in front of that person that you really want to sign an agreement, because you'd rather mix up and mess up in advance rather than with that person. So any questions before we call it a day? I really appreciate all of
Yes,
you.
I'm sorry. I
Go
did.
ahead.
You said reach out to Imani. Is she your assistant or is she another Keller Williams agent?
Imani Anderson is Arthurine's daughter, and she's the one who would have sent out the link for today's Zoom meeting. And so I'll send to her all of those files that I had in this presentation today. And that way you can either get the whole set, or if there's just one in particular that you want to get, just let her know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you for everything.
Thank you, James. It was a pleasure. I hope it was helpful and that y'all learned at least one thing today.
Great stuff there. Great stuff. Very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody
Yes.
have a good day. We're going to sign off.
Thanks, Connie.
Bye.